Hello,
Hi, everyone.
welcome. We're so excited you're here.
Yeah, ooh, look at that number go up. They're coming, they're coming, they're
I
coming.
know. I see it. How exciting.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. We're happy to see you. We'll be getting started in just a little bit. We'll give people some time just to trickle in. But if you are here today, you are at our Paying for College session with APU. We're going to jump into some really good things today about financial aid, a couple different other questions that you might have will likely be answered in this presentation as well. But again, we'll be getting started in just a few minutes to give people just a little bit of time to trickle in.
Yes, we're so excited that you're here. My name is Sarah Hernandez. I know my little name says undergraduate admissions, but my name is Sarah Hernandez. I am an admissions representative with APU, and I graduated from APU in 2018, and I studied kinesiology, which is kind of similar to sports medicine. So if you're interested in that, let me know. I love that department a lot. What's your name, good sir?
Well, my name, as you could probably reason, is Thomas Chan, and I am, like Sarah, an admissions representative here at APU. Sarah and I actually graduated in the same exact class 3 years
We
ago.
did.
Yeah, we did. Golden class of 2018 is what I call
Come
it.
on.
But I graduated with a degree in communication management, and I also earned myself a minor in psychology and the honors college along the way. And so
Nice.
in likewise fashion as to what Sarah just said, I love talking about my experiences and what I was able to do with my degree and even what I'm doing now. And so if any of those things interest you, please feel free to put a question in the chat and or not the chat, but the Q&A box, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll be sure to get to those as well.
Yeah, we're excited. This event gets to be semi-interactive, so although we can't see you, we know you can see us, and you get to interact with us through the Q&A feature of our webinar. So at the very bottom of your screen, right around here, there should be a Q&A icon. So you'll click on that to ask a question. And what'll happen is Thomas is going to teach us a little bit about specifically financial aid and what it looks like to pay for college. And then we're going to save the whole second half of our event to answer your questions live. So Thomas is going to be answering questions live, and I will be behind the scenes answering questions if they are not necessarily pertaining to financial aid directly, but if they're more in regards to the general admission process to APU or specific majors, things like that. I'll be behind the scenes answering those questions. And like I said, Thomas will be answering questions live that are pertaining to financial aid, paying for college. So ask us whatever questions you have. That is what we're here for. In addition to that, we're also recording this event and we're going to post it to our APU YouTube page as well. So you can view this back later. You can send it to your friends, send it to your mom, your dad, whoever. And we will make sure you can view this presentation later as well.
Exactly. Great. And so with all of that established, I think we'll go ahead and begin. We'll let whoever else comes in just kind of trickle in and join us as we get started. But without further ado, why don't we go ahead and jump into the meat of what we have today. Again, go ahead and feel free to plug that Q&A box if you do have any questions. In fact, I already see one in there, so great job. But keep on plugging that box. If it's a question that Sarah can answer for you immediately, she'll type it to you. But if it's a broader question that maybe all of us could benefit to hear from, I'll be sure to address that as soon as we're done with our presentation today. So without further ado then, let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, everybody, here we go. Heading straight for the races on this one. So as we mentioned earlier, this is our paying for college presentation. We're going to jump into a couple great things, but just to give you an idea of what that will look like, this is our roadmap for the night. And so we've got about 4 parts for us today. We're going to start off with investment and affordability, talk a little bit about what it means to invest in a college experience and what that's going to look like for you, what kind of returns you can experience on that. In part two, we'll go over some scholarships and talk a little bit more about what some free money can look like based off of academics or even other achievements that you may have already earned at this point in time. Part three, we'll jump straight into grants, which functions a little bit differently, still part of our financial aid bucket though. And the last part, as we land our plane tonight, it's going to go straight into loans, which of course is a whole world in and of itself as well, but we will tackle that as soon as we get there. And so this is where we will be heading for tonight, starting of course with investment and affordability. Greeted to us, of course, by a lovely picture of our Cougar Dome on East Campus. So let's talk about this a little bit. So the question that often comes up when speaking about college is, what am I investing in? In other words, what am I going to get out of putting all of this time, all of this effort into paying for a college experience? Well, what I can tell you about college in general, but also specifically here with us at Azusa Pacific University, is that you are going to get quite a few different things. For one thing, you're going to get a quality education. For us, being a small private Christian university of 9,000 total students and 4,000 undergraduate students, you're going to really have a wonderful student to faculty ratio rate of 12:1 and an average class size of 19. What that essentially means is that you are investing in a degree where you're going to get hands-on experience and direct experience from the industry's leading leaders in any field that you might get, whether it's nursing or any of our arts programs, communication, business, you name it. In any of those programs, you are going to get top-notch professors who have the capacity and the bandwidth to fully invest in you. What that also looks like is the fact that we have no impacted degrees here. In many other institutions, just due to the sheer number of students that may exist on that campus, it can be difficult to get all the classes that you need in time to graduate. That is a non-issue for us here at APU. You are going to be able to get access to all the resources and all the classes you need pretty much without question, again, because of the size of the campus that we have here. And of course, for anybody who's looking to work and earn a little extra change on the side, we do actually have over 2,000 campus jobs that you can also invest in. But the good stuff doesn't stop there. After college, there are even more benefits that you can reap after graduating. And so what we find for many of our graduates is that many people will actually continue their education and find widespread success in their employability. Graduates from APU actually have lots of success in finding jobs and even have competitive salaries as soon as they leave campus. And as we'll see in just a little bit, that competitive edge doesn't stop as soon as a student graduates, but actually continues and gets even further and further as an individual gets further in their career. And so just to visualize that a little bit, I, for one, love graphs. I'm a visual learner, and so if you're like me, this will probably make a lot of sense. But what we're seeing is that compared to the national average, graduates of Azusa Pacific University earn more over their lifetime than virtually any school. In fact, if we're looking at this data here, as early as 2 years in, we're looking at about a $16,000 difference in that first salary. And fast forward all the way to 6 years, that difference actually increases all the way to about 18,000. And again, these are just averages, which means that there is room for fluctuation, possibly even more disparity for graduates who have that much more of a competitive edge in their salary upon graduation. Another graph for us. In the class of 2019, so about 2 years ago, we found that 86% of students found work or continued their education going into grad schools or even doctoral programs after they finished their education here at APU. And as far as those grad schools go, we're not talking about any small schools either. We found that many of these alumni went on to some pretty prestigious universities, some of which include the likes of Princeton, Duke, Johns Hopkins, UCLA, USC, and many, many more, even beyond this list that we have here today. All right, moving on to our second piece of the day, or in this first section, I should say, is that affordability piece. And so as we are here, we're going to be talking about two things: sticker price versus the true cost of attendance. And so sticker price, very simple. If you Google us right now, Google Azusa Pacific University cost, that's what you're going to see right on the internet. It takes into account pretty much everything that is going to be factored into the cost of college without factoring in any financial aid. And so that is the key thing right there. It does not factor in financial aid. And so more often than not, the true cost of attendance, which includes financial aid, is oftentimes much, much different than what you'll see in a sticker price. How different, you might ask? This is what we're looking at here. And so for us here at Azusa Pacific University, if you're looking at this graph here, we find that the national average of an average true cost of attendance, so again, including financial aid, is actually higher at most other private schools relative to Azusa Pacific University. According to this graph here, we're seeing about $7,000 annually in a difference, which is quite a remarkable sum of money. As if it couldn't get any better either, what we also address a lot of times is the question of debt. Many people, my parents included, I will say, when I was a student at APU, had questions about what debt was going to look like, how much money we were going to owe once all was said and done on campus. Well, as we can see here, we actually find that Azusa Pacific students graduate with less debt than the national average for private schools. So much so, in fact, that we're seeing about a $6,000 average less debt after graduation. So again, going back to total cost or true cost of attendance versus that sticker price, we're finding that not only are those values lower than the national average, but as we'll see in just a little bit, those numbers are actually quite different when it comes to how much financial aid can really make an impact on your true cost of attendance here at APU. And see that sticker price go very, very far down. On that, we're going to go ahead and jump into the second point of our talk today, which is scholarships. Now, this is one of, if not my absolute favorite things to talk about here at APU. And the reason for that is because of this. Now, we're looking at the slide here. Doesn't look like there's much going on. All it is a 100% on a big white screen. Kind of reminds me of taking an eye exam, right? But there is a reason why we have this very special slide on here. And the reason for that is because 100% actually refers to the amount of our students who receive financial aid and scholarships here on our campus. Yes, 100%. That means each and every single student, without question, receives financial aid of some sort when they become a student here at APU. And so let's break that apart just a little bit. Looking at scholarships, there are 3 different types of scholarships that we mainly take a look at when we think about these types of things. And so the first type of scholarship is going to be our academic scholarships. And so for us, we scale these scholarships based off of a student's grade point average or GPA. We are a test optional university, so we do not actually require those for admission or for scholarship purposes. And so it is purely based off of a student's GPA. Generally speaking, the higher the GPA, the higher the scholarship that is going to be reflected in this academic scholarship bucket. The second type of scholarship is a program-based scholarship. And so for lots of different activities on our campus, there is actually the ability to earn further scholarships for being involved in them. So for example, if a student participates in any of our 17 Division II NC2A sports, there are scholarships involved for playing on those teams. For other clubs on campus, there's also scholarships involved there. For example, I was in a choir when I was a student here, got paid $1,000 every year just because I got to do something that I really love to do. And beyond that too, there's even specific majors on our campus that they themselves offer their own scholarships. Programs like our accounting school, or many of our arts programs like our theater and our music students will actually reap scholarships for being in those performing arts types of majors. And the last type of scholarship that we will honor here is what we call an outside scholarship. Now, these can take a wide variety of different forms, but essentially what this is that it's any scholarship that is not specifically through us here at APU. If you or your student applies for a local scholarship and earns some money through that, it's typically through foundations or even websites like FastWeb or scholarships.com. When you receive that scholarship, typically what will happen is that foundation will communicate with you how they're going to send that money to you, whether it's directly to you or to the institution itself. But regardless of what that is, we will be able to take a look at that and then tell you how that will factor into your financial aid here at APU. All right, so a little bit about our scholarships here. And so we actually have 5 main scholarships and 1 very special scholarship on the top that you'll see right there. And so if we are looking at the President's Scholarship down to the Mary Hill Award, those are our traditional academic scholarships here. And so what I will tell you is that this slide is Actually, not quite up to date on one piece here. We do have these scholarships still, but each scholarship is actually now worth $1,000 more than what you're seeing on the screen. And so what that will mean is, for example, a student earning the Mary Hill Award, they will actually earn $11,000 each and every single year that they are a student here, leading all the way up to the President's Scholarship, which is actually $22,000 each and every single year that they are a student here. Again, we're looking at GPAs for this, and so for any student that applies, they will know right off the bat as soon as they get that acceptance call which scholarship they are earning and how that will factor into financial aid. That final scholarship we're seeing, that's our trustee scholarship, the very special one I was telling you about. But we give this scholarship to about 7 students each and every single year. And any student that does get this actually gets full tuition coverage for every year that they're here at APU. Like we established earlier, there are program-based scholarships, so in things like athletics, being parts of specific majors, and even a couple other things, like our multi-ethnic leadership or MEL scholarship, which we do award to several students every year. There are incentives for that, for being involved in these types of activities. All right, we are making great time, my friends. We are already on part 3 of our presentation today, and that's going to bring us all the way into the world of grants. And so, as we can see here, grants essentially are free money based on financial need, which is determined by the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Student Aid. So let's talk a little bit about this as we get a lovely view of our Wynn Amphitheater in this picture here. But the FAFSA, or alternatively, the California Dream Act, is actually a required document that is needed to be completed in order to become eligible for grants. And so a little bit about the FAFSA. It is a very, very important form. And just as that first letter, F, free, indicates, you do not need to pay a single penny to apply for it. And so before I say anything about that, let me make sure that that sticks. It is a free document, so you have the world to gain and really nothing to lose by applying for the FAFSA. And so essentially, what this document does is it is a tool. You will log on to FAFSA.gov once the document opens on October 1st. So from now, it's in about 2 weeks. And so what that will do is as soon as that information that you submit on the FAFSA is received, they will generate an estimated family contribution, or an EFC score, for you. Now, that is an index number. It doesn't refer to the amount of money you're actually going to get, but essentially, that number is what the document uses to tell us, and really any institution that that document gets sent to, how much in need-based financial aid you do qualify for. And so that can be sent up to 10 schools. It's very simple. On the document, it'll give you the option right then and there and ask you which schools you want to send that to. But again, as soon as you send that off, if we receive it, we'll be able to generate an estimate for you of how much scholarships combined with these grants is actually going to be able to bring that total sticker price down and really make an impact on how much you will actually need to pay, which we find in many cases is actually much significantly less than what the sticker price actually reflects. And so just like we mentioned, October 1st, that's the launch date. That is true this year. October 1st is going to be the launch date for the next year ahead. And in order to continue receiving grants and loans, as we'll take a look at later, that FAFSA document actually will need to be filled in each and every single year. All right, so the FAFSA does determine a couple of different things. And so we're looking at 3 levels of financial aid. So we're looking at federal, state, and institutional aid. And so because these still do fall under our grants, these are still considered free aid. And so with federal grants, this is money that comes from the national government. And so this will often take the forms of things like a Pell Grant or an SEOG grant. Now, essentially, you do not need to qualify, or you don't need to add anything for qualification for this, but it'll automatically be added to your financial aid if you do qualify that based off of your household income. The next thing that we'll look at is our state's grants. And so this is money that comes from the state governments. For us in the state of California, that is going to be reflected in a Cal grant. And so while a Cal grant is considered a need-based form of financial aid as well, the amount on that typically goes up to $9,084 a year. And so what will happen with this, the way that this looks a little different than our federal grants, is that a GPA verification form is going to need to be sent from high school in order for this to be verified. Typically, the deadline for that is March 2nd, so that will be done through your student's high school counselor. They'll actually sign off for that and send a form to each school that needs that. And once that has been received, we'll be able to take a look at that and verify how much a student will qualify for a Cal Grant. And the last thing we're looking at is institutional grants. And so this is money that, as the name would suggest, does come from specific institutions. For us, that is reflected in our APU grant. And so what we find for this is that this is kind of like the last cherry on top of financial aid we find. We will take a look at scholarships, we'll take a look at other forms of grants as well. And then on top of that, if there's anything else that we can provide for you, that's where something like an APU grant will actually come into effect. And just like every other grant we've talked about, totally free. You don't have to worry about paying any of it back. It is just given to you. And we actually find that just over half, so 52.6% of incoming students do actually receive this APU grant from us each and every single year. All right, well, a frequently asked question that we get about grants is what we see here. And that is, can I appeal my EFC, which is again an estimated family contribution, score to potentially receive more grants? And the answer to that, thankfully, is yes. The way that you will do that is through what we call an EFC appeal process. And what this does is that essentially gives you the opportunity to have the government reassess your FAFSA to see if perhaps you do actually qualify for more financial aid than what was previously established. And so oftentimes we find this if there has been a significant change in household income from the past year, it might be a good idea to fill in this EFC appeal process. Like for instance, if somebody has lost a job or is making perhaps a little bit less income than they had before, filling out an EFC appeal essentially is how you can let the government know that perhaps there's been a change that would warrant more financial aid on your behalf. The only important thing to note about this process is that if you do want to move forward with this, that it does actually need to be completed at each university that a student is applying to. And so for this reason, what we find is often the most helpful thing is to wait on this process until you've narrowed it down to maybe your top 3 or even committed to a school already, so that you save yourself the time and effort of having to fill out an appeal process for each and every school that you do end up applying to. All right, everyone, almost done here. This is our last section of the day. We are looking at loans. And so these function a little bit differently than our grants. And so this is money that is received now, but needs to be paid back often at a higher rate due to interest. And so in the world of loans, there are 2 main loans that we typically will see, what we call a subsidized and an unsubsidized loan. And these do refer to direct student loans, I should add. And so the difference between these two is actually how that interest takes effect on the loan. And so for a subsidized loan, what will happen is that you can take that loan out and you do not need to worry about paying interest on that the entire time that you are in school. And so that and I should say as well, that as we're seeing here, the government will actually cover that for you until 6 months after you graduate. And so you can take out that loan freshman year and you really don't have to worry about anything at all, no interest. You don't have to necessarily pay it back anytime while you're in school. The government will cover that. But as soon as 6 months after you graduate does occur, that's when that first installment or the first payment will actually become due. On the flip side of things, as we can probably surmise based off of that description, the unsubsidized loan, that actually does accrue interest while you're in school. And so like our subsidized loan, that first payment does become mandatory 6 months after you graduate. But the difference is that interest does start to build on that as soon as you pull from it. So oftentimes when I'm working with families who are looking at loans, if an unsubsidized loan does come into the conversation, typically I will say that if you are looking at taking out this loan, it may actually be a good idea to consider starting to return those or pay those back earlier than that 6 months after your graduation, just to minimize the interest that does accrue on that specific loan. And so these are the amounts that we're typically working with when it does come to student loans. And so there are some limits to this. Sadly, we can't just take money from the government and use it however we want. There are some limitations to this. And so with our direct student loans, for incoming freshman students, the limit on loans is a maximum of $5,500. What we will see with that, though, is that for sophomores, that does actually increase to $6,500. And essentially, what this means is that if you do want to take out loans year to year, you actually have more money that you can pull from in order to do that. Now, keyword or key emphasis on can. Just because you can doesn't mean you have to. It is merely an option for you. When it comes to loans, the biggest thing with this is that it is a completely voluntary process. For some families, it's just what they need to make ends meet, but for other families, it may not be completely necessary. And so depending on where you fall on that, you may have one take or another on how these loans work, but at the end of the day, it is an option to you once it has been presented to you and your family. And so, of course, with this, once we see the junior and senior upperclassmen levels, that loan increase does go up just a little bit more to $7,500 every year. And then the final loan that we'll just spend a very brief amount of time on today is our Parent Plus loan. And so this loan does work actually a little bit differently than our student loans go. And so it can be applied for directly on the FAFSA website. And so what'll happen is that if you are a parent of a student, you will actually need to fill this out for your students. And if you are approved for that loan, typically what we see is that you are offered a pretty significant sum of money, sometimes even as much as the remaining cost of attendance that year. Now, key thing to note about this loan is that it does, of course, need to be paid back, but the interest on that is often quite a bit higher, and the return on that often needs to be paid back much sooner as well. So just like our student loans, just another option. You do not need to consider this if you do not want to, but if it is something that you would like to consider, it is there for you, again, directly located on the FAFSA website. Alrighty, and with that, we made it. Great job, everyone. That was a lot of information that we just went over today, but we will be jumping directly into our question and answer period as soon as we close this up. But if you do have any other questions that you would perhaps like to speak with someone about or have future communication with, this is the contact information for our undergraduate admissions office. And so my friend Sarah is going to pin that directly for us as well in the chat. But if you also want to record it down right now, you can send us an email at ugadmissions@apu.edu, and somebody will be able to connect with you. And you can also give us a call at 626-812-3016 if you'd rather speak to someone directly. All right, great. And now with that, we will go ahead and jump straight into our question and answer time. I do see some questions in there right now, so great job bringing those up, but we will tackle these one at a time. So, okay, so the first question I'm seeing here says this: what would the financial aid package look like for a person who comes from a family with no income and a higher GPA or SAT score? And so in a case like that, what we will often see is if you have a very low income or perhaps even no income, if we look back at the FAFSA like we talked about, that will typically indicate to us that you have an EFC score of 0. Now, that is the lowest it can go, but it also means that you are eligible for the highest amount of financial aid possible as far as need-based aid goes. So we will factor that into your financial aid. And on top of that, if you do have a high GPA, that typically means that you're also eligible for some of our highest scholarships that we can offer you here on campus. So if you remember our slide with the breakdown of all the scholarships, that's going to put you in the upper echelons of that. Typically what we'll see in the $17,000 to $22,000 every year mark, depending on exactly how high that GPA will be. And so if we add those two things together, typically we'll see that that results in a much lower true cost of attendance than what is reflected in the sticker price. But to give you an exact estimate of what that is, we can actually do that for you as soon as we receive your FAFSA and an application. Generally speaking, though, that's what we would expect. Okay, next question I'm seeing is a great one. I'm seeing, what are the requirements to be eligible for the trustees scholarship? Great. Well, let's spend some time talking about that. So, as I mentioned before, our Trustees Scholarship is a very, very special scholarship here on our campus. We are typically looking for students who are in the 3.9 or above range to be eligible. And what we also want to see is involvement in academic and even community-based activities. And so if you are involved in a sport or clubs on campus, perhaps you volunteer at the local homeless shelter on the weekends or play in your worship band at church, whatever those things are, we want to see that you are beyond just your academics, just a well-rounded person, right? And that you have really been able to stretch yourself and really put yourself out there for the good of other people. And so generally, that is the type of person we will be looking for. But as far as what the application looks like, you'll just want to submit your regular application through our apu.edu/apply portal. And then as soon as you do, check yes that you're applying to the trustee scholarship, and it's going to ask you for one additional essay as well as 2 letters of recommendation, one from an academic source and another from a personal source. It's just a form that we have ready, actually. And so all you'll need to do is put in those people's email addresses, and then that email will be sent to them to have them fill out that recommendation letter for you. And the key thing, I would be remiss if I forgot this, but the key thing about the trustee scholarship is that if you are applying for that, you're going to want to make sure you turn in your regular application as well as all of your trustees materials by November 15th. So almost exactly 2 months from today. Next question I'm seeing is, do we need to apply for the scholarships for APU, or does applying make us automatically eligible? And the answer to that, thankfully, is the latter. And so what that essentially will mean is that all you need to do is turn in your application via our website. So again, that's apu.edu/apply, which I will add takes most people about 30 minutes to finish in one sitting. I always love to say that's about the same amount of time it takes to watch your favorite sitcom on Netflix. And so, in the same amount of time that you could watch an episode of The Office or Friends or New Girl, whatever tickles your fancy, really, you could also send in an application to APU and be in the running for a pretty competitive academic scholarship as well. So, you don't need to worry about anything. As soon as we have all of your documents, including your transcript, we will do that automatically for you and notify you within 2 weeks of both your decision and of which scholarship you're actually earning here at APU. All right. Great questions, everyone. I see them keep coming in. Keep submitting them. Keep submitting them. We're getting some good ones. So let's see here. Next question I'm seeing is, if I submit my application before February 15th, will I still get a chance to receive a scholarship? And will there be any difference between priority and early action? Another great question. So the answer, in short, is yes, you will still get a chance to receive that scholarship. We will do the same exact process for you, and we will follow through and tell you what that is. Now, with early action as opposed to our main priority application deadline, there's only one key difference in that. So we are early action as opposed to early decision. So if you apply early decision, which some institutions do have, all that will mean is that if you apply to that school and they decide, hey, we want you to come here and they accept you, you are going to that school. There is no ums, ifs, or buts about it. You are locked in and you are committed to that school as soon as they accept you. We are not like that. We are early action, which means all it really means is that if you apply early, by November 15th, we're just going to get you an answer of your admission here that much earlier. Again, our turnaround is typically within 2 weeks. And so applying by that November 15th early action deadline essentially means that you will hear from us before Christmas of this year, oftentimes way before that. And so I always love telling people, how much better of a gift could you bring home to your family than saying, hey, I got accepted to APU. I'm going to college, right? I mean, that is such a remarkable thing. And we truly believe in the power of a process like that, which is why we have an early action deadline like that in place. But in both instances, you will still be eligible for scholarships, but that early action deadline is, again, going to be the deadline for our trustees application, as well as if you are applying for our nursing major, that November 15th is also going to be your deadline as All right, I see another question about trustees. We talked about that a little bit. So again, we're looking for a 3.9 GPA, generally speaking, as well as involvement in community and academic activities is what we're looking for eligibility. Next question is for merit scholarships, will we receive higher grants if we have a higher GPA or if we are involved in more extracurriculars? The answer to that actually is no. And so we do scale our merit scholarships purely based off of GPA. And so we don't look at anything else when it comes on those 5 main merit-based scholarships. But what I will caveat that with is, again, if you're looking at the trustee scholarship, because all of a sudden, if you are in the running for that very exclusive scholarship, then we do want to know about your extracurriculars. We want to know about all the activities you've been involved with, and honestly, why or what makes you so awesome. That's really what we're looking for, right? And so if you are looking for the trustee scholarship, yes, we want to hear all about those, but if you are not applying for that, then it is not necessary to list those on the application. All right, let's see. Okay, I'm getting another question about where I can apply for scholarships that are offered by APU. So again, you don't need to apply for those anywhere except our main application. By applying to the school, you are automatically also applying for our merit-based scholarship. So it is all in one. No need to search for them anywhere else. Another question I'm getting is it a requirement to fill out the FAFSA in order to receive academic scholarships from APU? No, it is not required to do that. You'll still get an academic scholarship regardless, but like I mentioned earlier, by applying for the FAFSA, you have the world to gain and really nothing to lose. And so while you don't necessarily have to fill out the FAFSA, I would strongly, strongly encourage you to fill out that document just because you're only setting yourself up for greater success if you do fill out the FAFSA, because it will allow you to become eligible for things like grants and loans, which are only more resources that you can use to help fund your college education. Let's see, does the initial scholarship offer change over time at APU if a GPA increases? The answer to that is no, and the reason for that is because we scale that academic scholarship purely off of a high school GPA. And so of course we do want to see you do well here in your academics here, but we do not actually take that in consideration for your merit-based scholarship here. What I will say, for anybody here who's looking to go into grad school or pursue further education beyond the undergraduate level though, that's where that GPA is going to be really important. It's because aside from involvement in activities and just a shown dedication to what you're studying, that GPA is really going to be very important in consideration for any master's or doctoral programs that you may want to consider outside of your undergraduate years here at APU. So all that's to say, keep your grades up. Whether you are in high school or in college, it can serve a great purpose for you and wherever you're looking to go. How much is typical room and board cost I'm seeing? So that is a great question. Typically, when we are looking at that, we find that room and board roughly comes out to about $10,000 every year. Now, combined with our tuition of roughly about $40,000 every year, that's what gets our sticker price of about $50,000 every year. Now, again, though, remember that every student here does receive scholarships of some sort. And so because of that, no one here ever ends up paying that much. In fact, oftentimes it's much less. So much so to the effect that oftentimes the cost of attendance here can actually be a lot lower than what you'll see at a private school. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, great question. What is the difference between the trustees and director scholarship? Okay, I see. So the director scholarship, that is one of our 5 main academic scholarships here at APU. And so that scholarship is worth $15,000 every year that you get based off of your GPA. So if you fall within a certain GPA range, you can actually qualify for the director scholarship or any of the other 4 scholarships available. Now, the difference between that scholarship and the trustee scholarship is, again, the trustee scholarship is a full overhaul, right? If you do end up getting that scholarship and are one of our 7 recipients of that award, that is full tuition coverage all of your years here at APU. As opposed to the director scholarship, which is $15,000, and I will say that's still not bad, not at all. But what will happen is, if let's say you initially qualify for the director's, the president's, or the dean's scholarship, any of those scholarships, and you do end up getting the trustee scholarship instead, those don't actually stack. And so what I mean by that is that if you do get one of those scholarships and you end up receiving another one later on, we'll actually go ahead and defer to the higher scholarship as your final award. So if you start with the director's scholarship, maybe your GPA goes up, and then all of a sudden you qualify for the dean's scholarship, which is a little bit more. We'll actually give you the dean's scholarship instead of the director's scholarship. And in the same vein, if you get the trustee's scholarship, any other scholarship you got before, we will actually give you the trustee's scholarship instead, just because 10 out of 10 times it is going to be higher than what you were previously earning. All right, another question I'm seeing, is an SAT required for scholarships? And the answer to that is no. We are a test optional university, and so we do not need test scores for anything. Not for admission, not for scholarships. If you have them, you can send them to us, but it is not mandatory by any stretch of the imagination. Do you offer any scholarships for transfer students if they have a high GPA from another school? Love that question. And the reason for that is because the answer is yes. And so we do actually have a wonderful transfer program here at APU. And the wonderful thing I love mentioning about our transfer program is that you do not need to wait until you earn your associate's degree in order to transfer to APU. You could spend as short a time as 1 semester at a junior college or any other institution, decide that you do actually want to come to APU, and transfer in the very next semester. And so what will happen with that process is that, in a similar vein as if you were applying directly from high school, we will take a look at your GPA and your transcripts from that college that you're applying from. We will do a very similar process where, looking at that, we will then determine which scholarship you earn based off of your community college or university, if you're transferring from a university, transcripts. And so what I will end this statement on is that actually applying as a transfer does make the scholarship brackets or the requirements to earn a certain scholarship actually a little bit easier. And so let's say you applied to APU right out of high school and you earned the director's scholarship. And you decide, actually, I'm going to take a year at community college and apply again, and you get the same GPA, there's a chance you could actually end up qualifying for the dean's scholarship, which is the next tier above. But all that's to say, of course, if you get a significantly higher GPA at your community college or university than in high school, we will then actually use that for your scholarship. And so all that's to say, there is a pretty big incentive if you do want to transfer, just because more oftentimes than not, we'll find that you can actually qualify for a higher scholarship as a transfer student as well. Okay, let's see. Another question I'm seeing, if I submit my application before February 15th, will I get, okay, we actually answered that one already. Okay, got it. Okay, there we go. Next question I'm seeing is it possible to get more than one APU scholarship? And the answer to that is technically yes. And so let me clarify what I mean by that though. So as far as our merit-based scholarship goes, you will only get one of those. But of course, we will give you the highest one that you can possibly qualify for. So depending on your GPA, that will determine if you're getting our Mary Hill Award, if you're getting our trustee scholarship, or maybe our president's scholarship. It all depends on what that GPA is. So again, you get one of those, but where you can potentially get more scholarships is in your involvement in other activities on campus. And so, like I shared a little bit earlier, I actually got to be in one of the choirs here on our campus, which, by the way, is something I never thought I'd do, but I ended up loving it, and I did it all 4 years that I was a student here. But because I was in that group and I was singing at churches and other schools on the university's behalf, I actually got paid $1,000 just because I was part of that group. On top of that, I made tons of great friends, had a great time seeing some wonderful places on our yearly tours. We got to go to places like Northern California, the state of Arizona, and even Hawaii one year. And again, it was all paid for, and in fact, I got paid $1,000 to do that. So, if that interests you, or there are activities on our campus like that, or even like becoming a student athlete on our campus, there is room to incur more scholarships through programs like that, and even specific majors as well. And so, for example, for many of our theater and our music majors, they will actually submit audition tapes or even come in on campus to do an audition. And based off of those auditions, the schools that they are auditioning for will oftentimes give them further scholarships for their performing abilities. And so, all that's to say, there is room to earn multiple scholarships here on our Azusa campus, but they will come from a few different sources, if that makes sense. Another question I'm seeing is, if we have a lot of scholarships from outside of APU, does that affect the scholarships we get from APU? The answer is no. And so I hope that by hearing that, that does encourage you to take a look at those scholarships, because it can only benefit you in the end. So what will happen is you will get to keep your academic scholarship. Again, it's only affected by your GPA, which means that regardless of if you've been involved in other things or not, that is there on the table for you right off the bat. And so we will take that into consideration. And if you do end up earning any other scholarships from any other foundation or a website online, we will be able to accept those. All you got to do is send those our way, and then we will add those to whatever scholarships you are earning here at APU as well. All right, another question I'm getting here. It looks like we're almost done with those questions, everybody. So if you do have any last minute questions, go ahead and make sure you plug those in about the next minute or two, because it looks like we're just about done. But last question I'm seeing right now is this. It says, do I have to play a sport all 4 years of high school to be considered eligible for sports scholarships at APU? And what I will say to that is no, not necessarily, but here's why. And so keep in mind, we at APU, we are an NC2A Division II competing school. And so that means that we compete at a very high level, and that even locally to our teams, all of the athletes that do compete have been owning their craft oftentimes for many, many years. And so whether it's basketball, baseball, softball, soccer, you name it, you're going to want to show that you know your stuff, that you are a practice and a tried and true athlete, and that you have what it takes to represent our school at the Division II level. So all that's to say, do you have to have been playing your sport for 4 years? Well, no, you don't have to, but typically I would say that having played 4 years at a competitive level is going to be really what gives you the edge to then compete at a higher level once you get to collegiate sports. All right, and with that, it looks like we have answered all of our questions today. All in total, you gave us about 55 questions today, so great job, everybody. But just as I'm saying that, there's one more. And so why don't we go ahead, we'll close off on this last question, and then we will conclude our event tonight. But our last question of the night is going to be, is there a specific GPA you need to keep up your academic scholarship? And the answer to that is yes. And so typically, we're looking for a student to keep I believe it's a 2.8 GPA, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but a 2.8 GPA to maintain any scholarship here on our campus. So regardless of what that is, you're going to want to see a 2.8 GPA throughout your studies here at APU. And you're welcome. Look at that. Thank you afterwards. Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us tonight. It has been a pleasure sharing just a little bit about financial aid and costs of attendance. And I hope that this time tonight has cleared up just a little bit of the waters as to what some of those can be. But of course, if there was a question you had that was not able to be answered, or perhaps you're like me and it takes a while to digest things, and later on you realize that you do have a bunch of questions, Sarah has put the contact information for our office in the chat. So at any time, please feel free to reach out to us to begin your application, or to even schedule a tour here in our campus to come check out everything firsthand. But again, thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's been a pleasure speaking with y'all, and we hope that you have a wonderful evening tonight.